Welcome everybody. Welcome to Grumpy Uncle Talks episode 4.
Number 4, big thing for us.
Never thought we'd get this far, right?
No, I always said let's do this as a always on, just keep on doing these things. But collaborations like this, you need to like each other to want to continue, and it seems like we do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's fun. So what happened since last time? Now it's a new year, 2024, right? It's almost end of January. I have my birthday on Sunday. I'm turning 42.
Wow, that's old.
Yeah, I know. I feel
Yeah,
old. That's why I'm a grumpy uncle, right?
exactly. It would be fun to know if people who are listening are closer to your age or mine, or if they're even younger or older. It would be fun to know. If
Yeah,
they
maybe
relate
it's
to
just
someone that's 42, where you start to have aches, I assume, you don't wake up in the
hmm
middle of the night and go to pee 2 or 3 times. You cannot
uh,
drink like 4 hours before you go to bed. That happens at
I
42, right?
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can feel that. It takes a long time to get the aches away from when you've been working out and such. Yeah,
Mm.
for sure. Okay, so it's a new year, and we recorded last time in I think it was November or something like that, right?
Yep.
Maybe even earlier than that. So any New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, actually a lot. Like
Yeah.
small changes, but that has a huge impact on my brain. So it's people who want to know. If you want me to tell you, I'll tell you. But it's a quite laborious process I go through in my New Year's planning.
Okay, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the highlight. What was the biggest decision you think coming into this year?
The biggest decision, I think, for, as a male and a husband and a dad, it's very easy when my wife comes with suggestions what we can do as a family that I just say no because I'm already doing so much stuff. I don't need to do more. And then when I went through, because every single week I write down my magic moments. So go through that. I've done it for now 7 years, I think. So it's like 600 pages of text with a very small font. And I realized that 2023, my most enjoyable moments were things that I were doing with other people. So I told my wife, I'm gonna do something that's gonna take some time for me. It's gonna be a big change, but I need you to come with me and understand that I will do my best to not say no directly because I actually enjoy it when we do it. So that's from a family perspective, it's a huge thing. A brain perspective, also big.
It sounds like it. I think I'm the opposite. Like I always say yes because otherwise I have to come up with my own proposal for what to do. So my wife is like, well, you have to tell me sometimes when you think it's a bad idea, because then sometimes it doesn't turn out as well as she hoped with a trip or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, I knew this would happen. Why didn't you tell me? Well, then because then I would have to plan the trip, and then that's a lot of work, and maybe it doesn't even end up better anyway. So
Yeah, we apparently have completely different relationships with our wives.
yeah, yeah. I think my own biggest change this year,
Mm.
I think, is trying to create a little less structure around myself. I've been super structured last year with every
Well, that's a
single,
big change for you.
yeah, it is. Every single hour it's been planned in the calendar before, and there's been lists for everything and so on. And yeah, sometimes it feels like I spend more time following up lists than actually doing things. It's not really true, but it takes up mental effort. So one thing I did was getting rid of, like, I had an Aura ring before tracking the
I still
sleep, and
do.
yeah, you have it. And I, I think it was problematic for me because I did the workout and then I felt like I needed to input that workout when I didn't have the ring on because I wanted to complete statistics. So now I
Hmm.
just threw it away. And also, I don't think it really knew me that well. Sometimes he said like, "Oh, you're up for you should go for something really challenging today," and I was like, "No, I think I actually have a fever, so bad idea, ring."
Best suggestion.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
How does that? Because I usually, I think we are quite common there or similar. I had
yeah,
lots of routines that after a while, like consumed me. They didn't add as much as they did when I started them.
yeah,
And the initial days or week when you stop doing one of these routines, it feels a bit, uh, something's wrong. But then after a bit, you're like, yeah, this is actually good. Like,
yeah.
where are you in that? Are you past it, so you feel it's okay now, or you still like feeling like you're lacking something?
Actually, I feel a relief.
Yeah,
It feels
good.
like
That's good.
there's chores I don't have to do, so I feel relief with that. And this ring is very interesting because there are some instances where you take it off. For example, when I have more hair than you, so when I
Yeah, you
fix
do.
my hair, I sometimes have pomade in it, and I always take that ring off. So every time I go into the room to fix the hair, I'm like, I need to take it. No, there is no ring there, and I feel kind of naked. So that's one of the times when I actually miss it, not missing it as I need to have it, but like it should have been there. So, but yeah, I think most of the routines are good to get rid of these ones, and they serve the purpose for a while for sure. But we'll see where we
Cool.
end up with this.
So why
Yeah.
are you still willing to do an episode 4 and onwards? What's happening since we started on your side?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a good conversation to have, and we talk anyway sometimes, but not that regularly. So why don't record when we talk? Because I think there's a lot of good ideas and perspectives coming up, and I think you coming from a sales and business perspective and me coming from a more product oriented and leadership oriented perspective. There's things I want to spar, like we sparred last time with the agile sales and
Yeah,
having joint goals and such. It's interesting to hear your take on that. And I think there are some things I want to discuss in this episode too about how to structure product team, and maybe we can make an analogy to sales teams also if there is one.
I am ready for it.
Yeah. And what about you? Why are you still with me here?
One, I think it's fun
Yeah.
because I think people who read what I like in my LinkedIn post when I drop the shorts, it's this is a way to grow my brain. And the way you and I started talking, I absolutely love it. It's like you were saying something I was doing is bad. I started asking you like, what the fuck's going on, man? What don't you understand? Or is it me that are not able to communicate something in a way that you're supposed to understand? Are you my ICP or not? And just when we started iterating and discussing, realizing, hey, this is a cool guy. And meeting people when you are grown up that you haven't been to school with or haven't been in a company with, it's not that common to just meet like, yeah, I like this guy.
Mhm.
So it's a
We
bit of a
appreciate that.
bromance thing right now. So though, yeah, but I
Yeah.
appreciate the time we're spending together because it's growing my brain and it seems like we are almost at a similar situation in our lives, which is also good. I want to
Yeah,
be
and
in those situations.
there is also something with this project that we did because I spoke to my wife during lunch right now. Like
Yeah,
I'm a little bit frustrated on Thibaut. And it was because I told you before that last time we recorded, we only had audio in one ear
yeah,
from your cast, and then I'm like a little bit more of a detail-oriented person, and I want more of like they needs to be good, it needs to be good sound quality, at least decent, and things like that. And when we cut the shorts. So I was like, Thibaut, he said that he no way that I'm gonna go in and test before. I feel like in his tech support, it's like he wants me to do that, but like it's a passion project, so I'm not gonna spend time on doing that. He needs to take care of his own stuff.
I think that
So I,
I'm gonna
yeah,
share the text message that I sent to you so everyone knows how much I'm provoking you.
yeah,
So pretty much you're sending a text and saying, hey, remember that your one ear didn't work in your last recording? People didn't hear that. I'm like, yeah, maybe you should test it. And like, yeah, that's a fun proposal. And then you said, you should probably go into Squadcaster and test it. And my answer is, haha, nice thought anyway, emoji.
smiling,
I
yeah,
know when you read that, like, I want to tell him that he really needs to fix this because I have that detail-oriented mindset, and I'm just laughing.
yeah. You're laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Hmm.
But
Okay.
I'm happy that you share your frustration. I respect it. I understand completely where you are coming from. I'll do my best, and hopefully people will hear us in both ears this time.
Yeah, and it's so funny how it solved itself because now when we connected, all of a sudden you had a headset on, and I think this sound will be perfect,
Hmm.
and I think my sound will also be better with this, even though you can't see the luxurious hair because of the headphones. But anyway, okay. So topic for today, I was
Yes.
thinking about product development team setups. And what does that mean? And why do I want to talk about that? Well, basically, when you build a product, you need to have a certain set of competencies. And I've been at so many places now where I've seen a certain competency lack in all these teams that I just get so frustrated, and that tends to create a lot of trouble for the deliveries. And I'm even at a place right now where we lack this competency in helping these guys out, which is a portfolio company of mine. So I wanted to spar that with you and see if you experience something similar, see if you can see any analogies with sales.
Shoot.
Because I also, yeah, and because I think, first of all, there is a tendency in people to want to do what they're good at. In a product development team, you need developers, right? You need people to build the actual code.
Just as a definition and word stuff and vocab here, do we want to translate things for people who might not be that involved in startups, or do we just assume that they understand
Yeah,
everything?
yeah. This is for startups, but for all companies that create new products. But sure, let's do that. So you
Like,
have ideas
give us a
coming in.
101, like basic.
Yeah, the 101. Let's try that. So
Mm.
product development 101. Ideas floating around. Somebody has an idea that they want to do, and then somebody needs to take that idea, make it concrete. They need to build it, and they need to launch it and take it to the customers and the users, and they start using it. And then the iteration loop starts, and they give feedback and so on. So when you start out with a completely new idea, you usually build something called an MVP, minimum viable product, which is like the most basic thing you can do. But if you're strapped for resources, it's like, well, we need someone to code because without the code, there is nothing working.
Yep.
So you can't really put it in the hands of someone. And the most rudimentary form of a product development team is actually a coder because you could create something and launch it and somebody could start using it. It's probably not going to be doing much good because you will probably be making the wrong thing and will have poor design and so on. But you could make something. So this is why usually you start out with having a developer on the team, and then you have someone from the business side or a product manager or something to collecting the details. And in early startups, you can get by with that, but what you lack then is the product experience and the product design. And the more complex problem you're solving, the more important design is and understanding how it should work and where things should be positioned. And I think I've been now involved in the last 2 years or 1.5 years, I've been involved in 2 projects related to the dashboards.
Okay.
And dashboards are deceptive. A dashboard is where you can see stats of
Mm.
some kind, graphs and such. And it's so easy to say, oh, we have a business. I want to see how it's doing. Give me a dashboard.
Yep.
Well, what should be in the dashboard?
Yep.
Anything could be there. So if you don't have a good designer there that can lay out different pieces and understand the needs and the needs of what to show, then you will
And
have a
now you
problem.
said designer. Is that the same thing as a developer?
No, that's the thing that I'm getting to. So
Mm.
what you need then is someone to design the experience, and design can be on different levels. It
Yep.
can be on the UX, understanding user experience, understanding the needs, and doing the research, talking to the users, interviewing them, not selling, but interviewing them to understand what kind of requests or needs or demands there is on the product. And then you have the GUI designer or the graphical designer who is good with the shapes and forms and colors and such, and know that the button should be rounded in the corners and be really appealing. And these could be the same person, but it's not always like that. And also a developer could be okay with the UI part, making the colors and such, but very seldom you have a full stack person that can do the actual implementation of the code and understanding the needs and how to position stuff. And what I notice is these designers usually lack in projects. So what happens then is that you start building right away.
Yeah.
And that is very tedious, very, very tedious. I can take an example from
I
actually a
think I
mature
think that would
company.
be very good because if you have a small company, as we are currently talking about, you just want to
Yeah,
get some code out, see if someone likes it. But
yeah,
if they actually can have the visual liking of it, so to speak, is also very important. In which you're saying there's a disconnect here in some of the companies.
yeah.
That's what
And,
you
and
want
and
to
also and
elaborate on,
also,
right?
when you build an MVP, you do it to
Mm-hmm.
get feedback. You don't
Yep.
do it because you think it will work perfectly, because nothing is perfect from the start. So you do it to get feedback. But to get that feedback, you need to put something tangible in the hands of the customers and users.
Yep.
And it could be finished code, but I think that's usually the slowest way to get that feedback. The best way to do it is to somehow convey your ideas in the forms of sketches
Mm.
or prototypes that is clickable or something like that. But what I noticed then is that if a team lacks a designer that is good in creating these clickable prototypes, they go straight into development. They go straight into implementing with code the exact behaviors. And they have all kinds of excuses for doing this. Sometimes the excuse is you can't really do all the transitions in the way that I want them to feel in a prototyping tool. There could be one excuse, or it's just the plain simple fact that people do and want to do what they are best at. So if I'm good at writing code, I want to write code. Anyone could pick up a piece of paper and make a drawing and saying, here's a square. This square is going to contain this graph if it's a dashboard thing. And then under that, we're going to have these headlines saying this thing. Does this make sense to you, dear user? Oh, no, that graph, what is that about? So instead of spending 1 week on building that graph and getting that feedback that doesn't work, you could spend that time in actually creating a prototype and getting the feedback faster. And even if you're not very proficient with these tools, Figma or XD or whatever tool you're using, you could still try just to put out some squares and get that feedback, because you will have to do that anyway in your own head. Because when you start coding something, you have to like visualize to yourself, oh, well, I want a square there. It's not that it's magically gonna appear a square just because you tell the computer AI isn't that good yet. I really don't think so. That you can tell it, like, create me a dashboard showing some nice graphs, and it will automatically understand what to show. So you have to do this mental exercise in your own head anyway. Why don't you do it on paper and show it to the users before you start implementing it?
Get that. This is also, of course, a cost issue and what type of people you have around you that you can recruit, either as a full capacity or lower capacity. Because what I've
Yeah.
heard from my experience is that the UX, the GUI, those people, you don't need them full time in the beginning, is what people say to me. I don't know if that's right. You can tell me if it's right or wrong. And then when they get inside, it's to what we in Swedish call as sminka grisen, like make the pig look nice. So
Yeah.
it's actually a pig, and now we're going to put some lipstick on it so you won't think it's a pig anymore.
Yeah.
So it's also this front end, back end, make sure it looks good. So it's there are many things if you have abundant resources like people did in 2020, 2021, no problem. And now in 2024, when you want to go leaner longer, the situation is different.
Yeah. So obviously, being a good interaction designer is a full master's education, and then you build experience on top of that. So it's not like it's something that anybody can do very well. But as I said before, anyone can draw the squares. So if you're
Mm.
going to do it, you're going to end up with a design anyhow. So I
Yep.
think you should make that design not in code, but in another type of way, on a paper or in Paint if you want that even, or your favorite whiteboard tool like Miro or Mural or something like that. You can show that and explain what you're thinking of doing. Um, so if you don't have a designer, somebody has to put the designer hat on,
Yep.
because the elements will have to be laid out. So do that before you start coding is one thing.
It's a
The
bit
other
like
thing is
when
that,
I was, sorry, but when I was younger, just so normal people get it as well, when you went did like chemistry in not high school, something like that,
yeah,
you had to do the hypothesis of what you thought would happen in that project that you were doing or that experiment before you actually did experiment. Instead of just, I'm going to do the experiment and see what happens. That's roughly what I'm hearing that you're saying. Make an hypothesis. What do you actually want to accomplish? And we say, yeah, this is good. People of our potential customers respond well to this. Now let's put it into code.
and if you think that I don't want to work with hypotheses, you're doing that anyway
Mm,
because your coded first application that nobody's seen before is still an hypothesis.
yep.
I think that if I implement this code in this way, somebody will start using my app. Oh,
Mm,
tough luck, they didn't. They didn't want to use it because it didn't make sense to them. So you have to redo it by hand again. So get that feedback earlier is one thing. And then you had another question that we didn't really touch. How many UX people or designers should you
mm,
have compared to developers? And I think it's true. You don't need one developer and one UX person, but maybe you need a quarter to half of a UX person for every developer. And I think that here is where some organizations, I've seen large organizations skimp out on this and like, oh, we have one UX per 3 teams or something like that. But what happens then is that you don't test the ideas early enough.
mm,
So if I would staff someone, I would actually say like, well, I think we should have half is half is designers and half are developers, because the designers keep on churning out ideas that they test with the users, and then they say these ones they responded well to, let's implement them.
mm.
So you can save a lot of time in development. by having more designers working like this. And
Do you know companies that work like that?
I know companies that work more like that.
Yeah. Do you notice the
What?
difference that you want to see as well?
No, yeah. No, actually, when I think about it, I've been working in companies with no UX people, and that's a mess. And I've been working in them with like one per two teams or something like that. And it's better, but still it's not enough, I think. So yeah, I noticed the difference between no designers and designers for sure. If you go all the way as I suggest, then I think there will be an even better result. Most of the startups that I coach or are invested in, they don't have designers at all. They have it as an extra competency that they bring in from the side, and that
Mm.
problem then is that they don't fully understand the problem that they are designing for. So then they don't own the design fully, and they're more into putting painting the pig, as you call it, or sminka grisen in Swedish. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's from my understanding, like pretty much, yeah, if you do an MVP, just get it out there and show people. But when you want to sell something, if someone just feels that something's not right when they have a first connection with your product, it's going to be very hard to convince them from a
Yeah.
sales perspective. So if you
Yeah.
can do anything to reduce those unnecessary, let's say, discongruent emotions that might occur, the better. But as you say, I haven't, in my, let's say, own experience when I see startups and also mature companies, design is always something like, yeah, it can be green, it can be red. I don't really care. The customer doesn't care. It's fine. We don't have to have a lot of science about if we should have the picture there or there. They just need to, it just needs to work. And that's where I think a lot of people misunderstand that. Of course, it needs to work, but it doesn't matter if it works if they won't actually give it the time to get to the working part. Do you know what
Because
I'm?
work is having a good UX. For something to work, it makes sense also. And if you're working with the consumer products, they are very sensitive to this, obviously, because
Yeah.
there are so many products out there that if it doesn't feel polished, then well, I don't want to use this. So I'm a little bit curious. Now we talked about like you can save a lot of time by doing
Hmm.
design sketches up front and before implementing them, and I think that's an underappreciated way of executing, not jumping straight into developing. Do you, putting you on the spot a little bit here, do you see
Yeah, go ahead.
any analogies to sales where it's the same there, where if you did this work up front, you wouldn't have this much legwork later?
Yeah, of course. This is a needs analysis. I had a conversation. I have always conversation with sales people, but also sales coaches and sales consultants that go in to optimize companies' sales departments. And over again, it's a bit sad that it's the same thing always, but it's about, are we understanding what the customer wants, or are we just pushing whatever we want to say? So you can compare with, like, if you have a person that's working in telemarketing, like they just call you in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, Chris, am I talking to Chris? Yes, I am. Okay, nice. Chris, are you available at this hour? Because I have a wonderful offer for you." You're like, "No, thank you, bye," because that's what happens. But if you are sitting with someone and you start to ask, "Okay, Chris, so from what I understand my research, it seems like you are into angel investments. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. What is that about?" And then you just start talking about whatever you want to talk about because everyone wants to talk about themselves. And in that, I'm just listening to what's going on here. And in my mind, I'm putting together my actual sales pitch. What should I say and when? Because I want to use as many of your words as possible to make you feel that, yeah, I understand you. So for me, that's what you're saying. If we don't do the hypotheses and designing what we think the customer wants and just pushing something in their face, it's like me coming and telling you, you need to have this product. And I don't even know if you actually have the need.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I like that analogy. You have to spend a lot of time making proposals, right, in sales, if it's
Hmm.
complex sales.
Yeah.
No, you don't like sending proposals. You just want to sign the order, or
No, it's the proposal for me, like in a company I'm working with big enterprise companies, it
yeah,
is a proposal, but the actual thing that it is just, are we understanding your needs?
yeah.
And then the actual way how we solve it, the actual real proposal, That's so late in the sales process.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think this is the analogy that's coming to my head now is that if you compare this to building a product, it would be like, well, I'm not even going to have a meeting with you to discuss your needs. I'm just going to spend a week on drafting a really nice proposal to you that
Mhm.
I'm hoping fits
You
you.
might.
And then you send the proposal and they're like, well,
And then I say you get a
you were wrong on
20%
the.
discount if you decide now and you don't even need it.
Exactly,
Why don't they
exactly.
want to buy it? I don't
Yeah.
understand.
So in the same way as you're doing the needs analysis as a salesperson, you need to do the needs analysis or problem analysis and understanding the problem space in product development too. You need to understand the problem you're solving. Understand the problem before you try to solve it.
For the people who listen, like really listen to what we're saying, the basic steps of what you need to do are pretty much, from my perspective, every single role that you do, the same. If you don't understand a need and you're not able to communicate that you are a person that can solve that need, and you then go into too deep details on how you can solve it, that will not help you. If no one trusts you that you can actually solve it, then there's no need to talk about price. There's no need to talk about all your cool features because no one cares.
Then in product development, what could happen is that you get this phrase thrown at you saying, we don't have time to do user interviews. We don't have time to understand our users. We need to launch, you need to get this built so we can launch it. So you're busy solving the wrong problem. Yeah. And sometimes you also get these opinions that, well, I started this business. I know what the customers need because I know them so well. Yes, hopefully you know them pretty well, but I still think it's worth taking this iteration. And in larger or mature organizations, I've seen horrible examples of this where
Do you have
people have actually
anyone,
been.
any you can actually share without them understanding fully that it's them?
Yeah, I can share one without
Because these
without
are
saying.
actually fun, and I think people learn from the actual mess ups that are happening every single day, even as a leader for your team. It's the same thing. But
Yeah.
if you have it,
So
please share
so
gooey details.
yeah, the GUI details. Basically, I was in charge of a team
Hmm.
that were supposed to deliver a functionality for internal users. And I wanted the team to go to these users that were going to use the system we were building to ask them like, do you really want it? How do you want it to work? Let's understand your day-to-day basis operations and so on. But the stakeholder that wanted this built for these users, this person said that you're not allowed to go and talk to these users because I know how they work every day. But this person didn't because it was actually like pretty high up level in the organization. This person did not spend his time with the day-to-day business in that
This
way.
sounds glee.
Very costly, very costly. And also there is also some magic of having the actual people building the product talking to the people having the actual problem instead of having someone relay it to you.
Hmm.
Every time people converse, you lose 50% of what was said. So when this person was telling our team what their users wanted, 50% were lost. And in some cases, this person wasn't telling the whole team, but only one person that then conveyed it to the team. So then you only have 25% of the information. And on top of this person also wanted me to take the requirements from this person to the team so they can build. So then I would have been another bottleneck with the information flow here. So what happened then? Well, we had these problems where spending 2 weeks for a full team of 8 people building features that then when we were showing it to the users in the end they said like, well, we can't use this is not how we do things day to day. So and this happens in mature, very profitable organizations. There is a lot of fat out there.
And if you come back to what we're discussing, you mean that if you had had designers in your team, you would have had them go to the users first.
So basically what you do is you take the designers, you go and interview the users and ask them lots of questions of what their needs are. You take these
Mm.
questions, you go back, you make a rough rudimentary wireframe and saying like, well, we were thinking of building something like this and show it again to the users and say like, does this make sense to you? And then they say, no, this and this doesn't make sense, but this is good. And then you iterate on that a couple of times. And then after you're done with that, with this design, then you can take it to development.
So just as a context to be maybe nice to that person, were you behind on schedule? Were you burning lots of cash, or was this just someone who wanted to say, "I'm important, do what I say"?
I
Okay.
think both. I inherited that project and it was behind schedule from the start, and it has been overpromised on the delivery speed. I was able to do that, and it was also pretty poorly conveyed what this business person actually wanted to have done. It was like a very rudimentary PowerPoint slide presentation that's like, oh, this is the problem we're solving, but it was a pretty complex problem. It was in the in the vicinity of 100 users that would use it that have very different use cases for different
Ah,
situations, we can say. Yeah.
an interesting thing that I assume comes back to how you want to organize your team. Because if you have a SaaS solution that is supposed to be generic for everyone,
Yeah.
then you can't do a lot of adjustments. You cannot have 4 or 5 different ways of doing things. It has to be, this is what you get. I know you might want to have these 20% extra for your case, but we need to have these 80% works for everyone. Have you been in companies that are at that phase when they had to like start to say no to a lot of extra things because it doesn't work for enough of your target audience?
Exactly like that. But as always, there's like you always have 10 ideas and you can only do one. So that kind of prioritization is always needed. I guess you do make trade-offs and you sometimes sacrifice the specificity for the greater good.
Designers are working together with the developers, or is it like, because you can talk about water flow, you can talk about agile, you can talk about whatever you want, but it seems
Yeah.
designers has to be 2 to 4 weeks or maybe a month and a half before the actual developer is supposed to get there, so they have the time to say, yeah, this is now the relay I want you to do. We are now going to the next one and we're gonna figure it out. But then one question that I have is that if they are 6 weeks ahead all the time, the thing that's being developed is actually something that they want. But even when you've done these things, I assume sometimes they're developing things that they still don't want. So how do you make sure you prioritize their time well?
So first of all, I think the designers should be part of the team, and I think also the developers need to be part of the ideation of how the features should work, because otherwise the designers will come up with things that is almost impossible to do or could do. And the other part of it is also that the developers have pretty good ideas on like this could be a pretty simple thing to do. It's a new thing that you didn't think about. You need the technical perspective to come up with these ideas. So I think having them in the workshops where you ideate on that is important. But as you say, I think that you need to have some design sprints going ahead of the actual implementation of the things, for sure.
And if you have, let's say, as you wanted, 4 developers and 4 designers.
Two, let's say two, yeah.
Okay, so one and a half. So 2 designers and 4 developers in one team.
Yeah.
The meetings that should happen for them to collaborate, is it like then one of the developers that is talking to both designers because the other three just as individuals don't want to, okay, just want to sit with the computer and do it? Or do you want everyone to be involved because there are extra benefits of that? Because sometimes like forcing great people, whether they're designer or developer, to be a part of a team, you have people who just want to do their own thing.
Yeah.
Do you then exclude them from your teams if you can manage them, or do you still want to have super skilled people that don't want to talk to anyone? Like, how do you manage that?
I really prefer to have them involved in most of the things. They don't need to do the nitty-gritty parts, but they need to be giving feedback and on the ideation part. So maybe you have a discovery workshop where you throw up ideas. Everybody's part of that, but then the ones who make these take that output and think about it and make something really concrete out of it. That's one designer, for example, and then take that back to the users and show it to them, and then they can come back and present to the other ones that everybody can be part of. But the actual manual work is done by fewer people. And same thing with when you develop stuff, the developers they can spar with other developers on the problems they're solving. They can spar with the designers because there's always things that you forgot about or didn't think about before, but the actual code itself should be written by one person. It's nice to do pair programming or sitting at the same computer for certain problems. I think that's how I would set it up.
Hmm. From my point of view, most of my startups are very, that I invested in, are very, very small, the teams.
Yeah, yeah,
2 of my best investments so far, they now have several people. They have a lot big customer success, they have big development teams, have their designers, and it's just
yeah,
interesting to see how they are working together. Because
yeah,
often that person that might be a co-founder that might not have been a great leader, but it's a tech savvy, super genius.
Yeah,
How do you manage that person when now you have a team of 10 people, designers and front
yeah,
end, back end, all the stuff that you called it? That's I just find it interesting because there are so many dynamics, like levels that you need to consider
yeah.
when you have those
And
people.
and there is a certain break point when you're not one team, so everybody cannot be
Mm.
part of all the like the standard meetings with sync meetings
Yeah,
that you have, or being
exactly.
up to date with everything. So when you pass like 8, 10 people or something like that, you need to be started to think about like how should we organize ourselves.
Mm.
And this question keeps coming up because first it's like, okay, now we have 2 teams, or we're not enough, we're too many people to be having in one team, so we need 2 teams of some kind. How do you organize these 2 teams? And
Mm.
then there is the same situation where like now we are 25, 30, 40 people or something like that. We are 4 to 6 teams. We can't be having 4 to 6 teams as one entity. Now we need to split up in departments of some kind, and then this problem just grows and grows the more people you get. So first of all, there is no silver bullet on how to organize, but you need to think about it really, really well, which meetings you're having and how you convey information. The other thing is that whatever you can do to keep the number of people down to be fewer is worth a lot.
Ah, nice. So you like co-pilots.
I like co-pilots. I like having one senior instead of 3 juniors, because every new people you add,
What does that mean?
yeah, instead of 3 juniors, you have one senior. Basically, it's more expensive to hire seniors, but they can output a lot more.
Hmm.
So I would rather have fewer people
But
and paying them more.
I find this to be something that is hard to understand because you're saying 3 people that are then working 24 hours a day would deliver less than a senior person that maybe works 8. How is that even possible? Like seriously, how is that possible? Because it's the same thing we talked about sales. Like, oh, I want to have 10 junior salespeople because they will do more. No, of course they won't. I understand it from a sales perspective, but
Yeah.
in your world, how can 8 be better than 24?
If you take it on a simplistic level, it's like when you type on the keyboard, when you're coding, for example, let's take coding.
Yep.
When you code, you type on the keyboard. There is so many combinations of keystrokes you can be making. It's almost infinite. So how do you know which combinations to press to solve the problem?
Mhm.
That's like the most basic way of looking at it. And obviously, there are ways you can better understand that, well, these commands that I usually should be using. But in a sense, like if you're not good at understanding the problem, have encountered similar problems before, or are good at problem solving in general, you can spend an infinite amount of time and never ever solving the problem. It's not like lifting bricks and pulling them on top of each other, but solving coding problems, you can keep doing that forever without ever completing it. That's just in a vacuum asking 2 people to solve the same problem. It could take more than 3 times as long for a junior than a senior to solve it. And then on top of that, I think is important when it comes to organizations. You're more people that needs to be involved, that needs to speak in the stand-up, that needs to have their say in the retrospective, that needs to be informed of what's going on. That creates a lot of complexity for the organization.
I haven't really thought about it that way before from the product side, that it's actually better to have 3 senior people than 9, 10 junior because it's only 3 people to talk to.
Yeah.
Of course, that's better because if you have to talk about with 9, and in this case, it doesn't matter if it's remote or everyone on the same site. I don't care about those things. A lot of people have many, many, let's say, truths of how it's supposed to be. But yeah, I like that reducing the team because as the longer you can have this fake family feeling, like everyone
Yeah.
can actually understand each other, the better. Then you can be lean long.
I really think so. And it's so easy to fall for the trap that like, well, we're going to get someone junior because they're cheap on the
Cheap.
salary.
Yeah.
And from a communication perspective, it looks great because like now we extended the team, we're more people, we're going to get more things done. But I think you're shooting yourself in the foot there.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take your responsibility in the job market to upschool people, to take on juniors, to teach them and so on. I think for startups, you need to think really carefully about it. It's not the way to get cheap work done. To get juniors, it's not going to
Mm.
be cheap. For more mature organizations, you can't take your responsibility there and add a junior per team or something like that. But most of the time, I've actually seen it on end perspective. How much did we get out of this person? Did we get productivity out of it, or did we actually lose because we had to school them and take time on doing that and so on? Well, I'm not sure it's actually a profit. actually. The only exception I see is when there is someone who is very talented and hungry and really wants to learn, that spends a lot of time on it and effort on it. Then it's worth it. They will grow quickly. But then you also need to keep compensating them, and you have to realize that they're not going to be junior for that long. They're actually
Mm.
going to be a mid and a senior pretty soon.
One of the most important things in all of recruiting and when you get people on board, at least if I should be somehow involved in that company, if the person doesn't do lots of research on its own time to develop themselves, just like sits back and say, "Tell me what to do and I'll do it." Like I want to tell that person like, "Why are you even here?"
What do you do then?
It depends on what role I have. If I can do whatever I want as an owner for the company, I just say, "Okay, this is your strike one. You'll have two strikes. I don't want to hear you tell me what I just want you to do, because this is not about you figuring out what's in my head. This is about you figuring out what our customer really wants. So next time, give me suggestions. Show me that you're trying to learn things. That's what I want to see." But then I always get this feedback, but you always decide in the end anyway. So I just trying to figure out what you want to do. Right? But that's not how it works. I'm never right. The customer is always right. I have had situations where I was not allowed to let those people go or have this strike conversation. It just brings down everyone in the team. Why is that person still allowed to be here and just not do anything?
And I think the best way, oh, this is going to sound cheesy, but I think when I played poker, I had this question of like, oh, I have this card coming up on the river, which is the last card that comes out,
Yep.
and it's always a big decision what to do then. And there's lots of money at stake. And it's like, what should I do here? And I sparred it with other poker players, and they always said one thing to me that stuck with me in life for all things. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have put yourself in that situation from the start.
Mm.
So you should have folded long
Way
before. You
before.
shouldn't even play these cards, because then you're going to end up with these really difficult choices. And I think you can try to think the same here. So like, what can you do that when you have problematic people if they're not doing the right thing if you hire them? But even further, spend a little bit more time in the recruitment phase
Mm.
and have a plan for like, well, how can we try this person out? If we onboard them, what is the expectations on them going forward, and can we exit it much earlier? Because once they're there, and especially with Swedish law, it takes a lot to exit them. And I've been doing that also. I'm actually a little bit more soft, I think, than you, because I never talk about strikes like that. I wouldn't even recommend doing it from a legal standpoint. I think you need to
Oh, you
be
have to
much
write it
more.
down. So it's like in Sweden, you have to write down, this is the first time you did something you're not supposed to do. I don't want to see this ever again.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's a part of that. So it's not just me telling you, strike one and you're out. That doesn't work, of course.
Yeah, and you also need to show that you're giving them the opportunity
Yeah.
to improve and you help them and so on if they are not on probation. Because if they are on probation, then you actually should say less and just go with your gut feeling there.
We're almost up on time, but just one more question because I think it's the dynamic might be interesting. When you have teams like this, I mean, let's say there are 10 or 20 people
Yeah,
and they did a round in 2022
yeah,
and they got in lots of money, had a great valuation, and now they're doing down rounds. And all these employees, they have their, let's say, their stock options, which were
yeah,
looking like they were going to be in the money, but now it looks like it will
yeah,
never be in the money.
yeah.
Add that dynamic into these teams. Do you see that teams will continue working, or do you just see that they will leave and go to another company where their stock options will be much more profitable earlier, so to speak? Yeah.
Yeah, my general view of the job market right now is it's really tough to find a job for developers and designers for the first time in 10 years or so. It's actually not the employees market when it comes to tech jobs. That in combination with the Swedish laws of mm, how you can get rid of people in the States, for example, is much more easier. We're gonna let people go on the day because we need to cut costs. Here in Sweden,
Mm.
you need to do a lot of more reorganizations and follow laws basically. So you can't really sack anyone you want in Sweden, which is, I think, part of our system, which is not that bad. I think will make us less fluid when it comes to people leaving because they're not in the money anymore, but maybe some of them will try to start their own companies
Mm.
instead because it's more profitable to do that. I have own no upside here anymore. But at the same time, it's hard to raise money.
Instead of people having two tech jobs at the same time, not knowing because you can do it from remote, now it's the people staying because they don't know where they can go. So
Yeah.
potentially when things, if things turn, hopefully it will, then we'll see a lot of potential changes when I can actually get better stock options.
I think that's correct. I think people will be looking, but they will be hesitant to move because also when you move, it's not always that you're in a favorable position as an employee.
Yeah.
So what can you take away from this if you're a founder or running a company? Well, I think you need to be vigilant on when the market turns.
Yep.
Because once people are set on leaving, they will leave. So maybe you don't have to renegotiate right now their stock options because they don't have any options. But if you're too late with this, you will see them leaving, and it doesn't really matter that you come waving with a new stock option plan.
Yeah,
So
that's true. I was in a negotiation with a company that wanted my services, but from my point of view, the terms were not that interesting. And they were thinking, but this is really good. I'm like, no, because the valuation is too high, compensation is too
yeah,
low, and the time that you expect, also the uniqueness of your product, it's not as unique as you want it to be. I can see it can become a good product, but it will take a long time for it to actually merit the valuation where you think it is. And that's also interesting. I still see people, companies that haven't really adjusted to that prices are different.
I see that too. I see some adjusting a little bit, but yeah, I think for the portfolio companies that you own, it's nice if you try to push up the valuations. I'm very, very conservative right now with putting new money in, and especially not putting good money after bad money. I have some cases like that, and I have some horror stories there, but there is not enough time to share that one. And I
Let's do
think
that.
it's
Let's see if there are any suggestions from the people listening what they want to hear next time. Otherwise, that would be fun to talk about because there must be a lot of people very close to the cemetery at the moment.
it's just like a drama, you know. It's worse in some cases than a TV show that is fictional, you know. There is so much gossip and so many people getting angry because now, you know, it's people's life work, it's people's money,
Yep.
and it's other people's money and different opinions on what to do. Let's see if people want to talk about that. I'm a little bit hesitant because it's people we know. If I start telling too much about it, who I'm talking about, but which
We'll
ones?
see
Yeah,
what
we'll
we
see.
think about episode 5. That's something else you want to just add or something that you want to share?
If you like it, then give us comments, connect with us. If you want to extend the conversation about something we talked about, do that, reach out, and we'll be happy to talk.
Yeah, I've had a few lunches now and several phone calls and actually lots of LinkedIn connections and messages where people just say, "Hey, that you said there helped me a lot." I'm like, "Okay, I'm very happy it did something for you." That's the beauty. Things that we know well is something that someone else hears for the first time.
Yeah, nice. Okay, it was good talking to you, Thibault.
Nice to talk to you too.
Okay, take care.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.